Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Our next letter comes from Jerome. Jerome writes, Hi Ken, I hope you read my letter, as over the past few months you've really helped me through one of the worst times of my dating life. Very happy to help. Last December, I started dating a woman who works as cabin crew who I fell very hard for. We were together for 5 months, and the first 3.5 to 4 months were amazing. We had such a strong connection. Our first date lasted 3 days. I now see this as a huge red flag. During that first date, she told me about her childhood family trauma, and seeing as she shared this, I told her about my own of having an alcoholic father. On the second day together, she'd invited me to go on one of her trips as a companion. I didn't do so, but was sorely tempted. We quickly got into a pattern of texting all the time, her calling me when she was away, and seeing each other 2 to 3 times a week when she was back from her long haul flights. She's a beautiful girl and was lovely, but I could tell she had insecurities. She often posted what were meant to be humorous memes about trauma. Within a month, she put a label on our relationship, and 2.5 months in, while with her on a trip away, she told me she loved me, and I told her the same. She previously said to me, she previously told me I love you drunkenly in voice notes while away, but I took it with a pinch of salt. During these months, she referred to me as her person, that I was husband material. She even told me the style of engagement ring she'd want one day, and also said she was the happiest she's ever been. She told me she'd already booked our anniversary off work and was scheduling holidays for later in the year. However, also in the early days, she talked often about narcissistic ex-jealous boyfriends. And when describing our relationship to people, she said it was suspiciously perfect, which always worried me, like she was looking for a problem. I'm beginning to sense big fearful avoidant vibes. Being anxiously attached, I felt slightly insecure about the relationship. Even in the amazing first few months, as she is beautiful, oozes sex appeal, and I wondered what she was doing with me. Around 4 months in, we had a night out and got drunk, and I saw a different side to her. She had a massive go at me, saying that I would say what she wanted to hear, and said that we needed to work more at being in love with each other. This shook me. The next morning, she claimed she had no memory of it, and when I asked her, she said she was in love with me. While slightly reassured, I still felt anxious. Over the next few weeks, things were relatively normal. I planned a trip away for her birthday, but over the few days we were away, she seemed to be picking fights with me. She seemed like she was seeing me in a completely different light. The following week, she went on holidays with friends and she withdrew all her energy. Her texts were shorter, less frequent, and included stuff that seemed like she was trying to bait me. When she got home, I asked her about it, and she said that I'd become too needy. Over the next week or so, she said that she had lost feelings for me, but wanted to see if they'd return. We spent another month together, with her getting more and more irritated at me over nothing, and she withdrew all affection. A week before we actually broke up, we had had a near breakup chat, and at the end of which she told me multiple times she loved me. The following week, she broke up with me. It left me completely broken. I felt like I'd met the person I was going to be with forever because of what she'd said. There is plenty more I could tell you about this, but this letter is probably too long already. Is she avoidant, or was she just not into me? I've since suspected that she is now with a guy she met while on holidays with her friends. I feel so hurt and betrayed. Thank you for everything you do. Your videos are very comforting. Jerome, thank you for sharing all this, and I'm very sorry you've been through this. And I can assure you that many men who I have worked with have gone through, well, particularly straight men, have gone through stories very similar to yours. So let's get straight into it. What a confusing shit show, and also romantic experience. So let's talk about this person that you dated. To me, I think I want to start from the very beginning, a very good place to start, which is childhood trauma from both of you. She's mentioning to you about how she's had all this trauma from her familyhood. She's also talked often about her narcissistic ex-jealous boyfriends. And you've also mentioned that you've got an alcoholic father. Okay, so to address her side of the street first, it suggests to me that she's very self-aware of the fact that she's had not the greatest childhood upbringing. It would suggest to me that she's probably reasonably aware of psychotherapeutic terms, and she's probably done, probably, I'm speculating, not that much to work on her attachment stuff, but she's probably hyper aware of how relationships go in terms of functionality. But I suspect that she, even though she might be reasonably aware of others and is using that psychology to be hyper vigilant of potential betrayal, I don't think she's potentially doing much to work on herself. I suspect that the fact that she was saying things like it was suspiciously perfect, it does indeed seem like she was looking for a problem, which to me is like that hyper vigilance we'd normally see in a fearful avoidant attacher. And I also find it interesting how you noted how it seemed like she was trying to bait you into a fight. You might have heard on previous letters or on lives where I've talked about this, a lot of avoidants will try and bait their partner into having a fight with them. And in some cases, for the fearful avoidance, it's almost like they are looking for an excuse as to why this wouldn't work out. And I think in a way, fearful avoidants almost feel more psychologically comfortable if they know you are going to react badly, because then it makes them feel like they have the upper hand, even if it's a dysfunctional, toxic relationship. They would rather feel, they would rather be in a dysfunctional relationship subconsciously, because it allows them to feel better about themselves, knowing I've got this moron who I'm dating who's chaotic and toxic and crazy, and I can read them for filth because of the way in which they behave, rather than push myself to be in a more healthy relationship and sit with the discomfort of feeling like I could potentially be abandoned at any moment or betrayed. It's easier for them to be in that dysfunction than to be in discomfort. Now, as for you, I do want to make a point here, Jerome. I'm not your therapist, but fearful avoidance typically have come from backgrounds where there's a lot of chaos and also likely an addiction present in one or more of the caregivers. They themselves often also use addictions as coping mechanisms. I know you have mentioned you're anxiously attached, but it is very normal for a lot of people who've had alcoholic parents or addict parents to date other addicts. It's also really important to understand that there are services like Children's for Alcoholics and similar 12-step recovery circles for people who've gone through these experiences, because it is very, very common to be with people like this if you've had a background of, you know, where there was addiction present in your life to one degree or another. I'm not saying you have to take any action on that, but I'm just going to say that's a really important piece of information that you've shared about yourself. And it might be part of the basis for why this experience happened the way that it did, amongst many other reasons as well, too. Not to mention that it seems like this is someone who was just hilarious, sending humorous memes about trauma. She seems to have been someone who's gorgeous and someone who really seemed to give you a lot of attention and validation, especially in the beginning where she's, spending long, lengthy time together. 3 days for a first date, I think is what you said, if I got that right. Yeah, first date lasted 3 days. Whoa. Like that's a lot. And you've also got her telling you, you're my person, your husband material. Who doesn't want to hear that? Like, as a straight man, I could imagine this is really great news to be hearing from someone who looks like they're absolute dynamite. It would be very flattering and also probably make you feel amazing. Now, not circling, moving on to other things that you've mentioned, I think it's really important to also stress that it's interesting how, going back to what I was saying before about how, she was trying to have a go, she was you felt, yeah, English, let me start that again. Circling back to how you felt like she was baiting you, I think that she would have probably, expected, like I said, for you to fight her. And also, I do think that her seeing you in a completely different light is definitely that avoidance side coming out, trying to find excuses to end this relationship as quickly as possible. And it's pretty jarring how, after you spend quite significant time together for her birthday, she seems to be picking fights with you. She's becoming less frequent in her text messaging. That avoidance side seems to have really picked up quite a lot. The fact that she was calling you needy as well is just pure projection. I don't imagine you were being needy, but I think a lot of this is stemming from her own stuff and her needing to find excuses to end this with you. And I think that it's really jarring when, shortly off the back of all of this, when you're trying to address it, she's telling you, I love you and I want to be with you. That stuff really fucks with people's brains, because on one hand, you're basically being made aware that there is an issue that's seemingly coming out of nowhere, where you're being called needy, she's picking fights with you, and then all of a sudden she's acting as if it doesn't even matter. And on top of that, acting like you never had any of the fights to begin with. A follower of mine introduced me to a fabulous word called confabulation, which basically refers to when someone tries to modify their memory of certain things. It means a few other things as well too. But I think this is classic confabulation here, where she's basically trying to, rewrite history to suit her narrative so she doesn't have to deal with conflict, and also confronting the fact that she was the source of the problem. She knew probably that she was acting out and behaving badly, but she doesn't want to deal with it because she can't handle conflict and confrontation. So when I look at all of this, I do think that it seems like, as things were becoming more real between the two of you, particularly on that trip where you're celebrating her birthday, things just spiraled from there. And it does seem to me like this was hot and cold to the nines. I don't know if there's anything else going on based on what you've shared alone, but I would say there might be some more stuff going on here, exclusive of just a fearful avoidant attachment style. I wouldn't be surprised if there's probably some other stuff going on that might be there as well too. But based on everything you've shared, the avoidant attachment piece, specifically the fearful avoidant stuff, pretty obvious to me. It seems like, yeah, definitely all in, anxious side. Then all of a sudden that avoidance side was coming out. This is a story I've heard many times told in just different ways. But I am sorry that, you have felt hurt and betrayed by this. To answer your questions, is she avoidant? My answer is I think she is. I can't obviously make that assessment because attachment styles aren't a diagnosis. And also, I'm going based on what you've written to me. That certainly seems like it. And it follows very similar patterns of, intensity and intimacy are increasing. She deactivates, shuts down, finding excuses as to why this wouldn't work, and eventually ends things abruptly. So yeah. Was she just not that into you? Hell no. I think she was very much into you. I don't think it was a case of being not that into you. I think if you're not that into someone, you don't say things like your husband material, I love you. The fact that she also was drinking to tell you some of this stuff suggests to me that the alcohol probably helped alleviate some of her fears. And again, I go back to the point of I wouldn't be surprised if alcohol is probably a substance she uses to manage her emotions. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's an addict of some kind, or at the very least, uses alcohol as a coping mechanism. Other than that, though, that's pretty much everything I have to say on this. I can see here at the end you mentioned, I suspected that she's now with a guy she met while on holidays with her friends. I mean, possibly. It's very common for a lot of avoidant attachers to move forward with someone that they've met in order to try and move on from the experience to help them feel better. And I could understand feeling hurt and betrayed. And I'm really sorry you've gone through this, Jerome. It's not fair that you've been through this. All right, I'm going to round out here. Jerome, thank you very much for your letter. This has been very informative about, what you've been through, and I'm sorry that you had to go through this again. If you're someone who enjoyed today's letter reading and would like to submit me something, just as a reminder, submissions will be open again mid-October as I'm nearly finished with the September batch of letters. And if you found this episode particularly helpful, feel free to leave us a review on Spotify, as it really helps to show that this is obviously doing its job for people. Other than that, I look forward to seeing everyone in the next letter reading.